Learn the most advanced recruiting techniques. Land the most desirable talent. Launch your company towards massive success. This is the Higher Power Radio Show with Rick Girard.
All right, one big thing that we have learned over the past year is that employers no longer have control over the people they hire. The balance of power has shifted, with the majority of people willing to walk away from an opportunity that does not align with their personal beliefs or values. Many companies are left scratching their heads as to why. So the thinking has evolved into, well, it must be the money, so let's increase compensation and benefits, hoping this will solve the problem, but of course it won't. The interviewees today are the ones making the selection, not the company. The interviewees are the ones evaluating the company for more than just a paycheck. And the interviewees are the people who have a lot of options, not the companies. So to get people to choose your company to join, you simply need to level the playing field by understanding what's in it for them. I'm Rick Girard, and welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show. We help entrepreneurs and executives win the strongest hires. We do so by sharing insights from top performing rebel entrepreneurs, game changers, and industry leaders like our guest today, Miss Lee Rubin. Lee is the founder and CEO of Confetti, a platform that helps companies build stronger culture by providing shared experiences for a distributed workplace. Their holistic tool empowers HR and other team leads to quickly discover and plan and book from a catalog of exclusive experiences that optimize corporate culture and employees' professional growth. Lee is a visionary culture leader with a decade of experience in B2B sales. She's one of the world's experts on remote event planning and has built her company from 0 to 60 employees in just 3 years, which makes Lee the perfect expert for today's topic. Lee, welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show today.
Thanks for having me, Rick. I'm excited to talk all about recruiting.
It's great to have you. And I swear I didn't mispronounce your name T just now.
It's okay. It's so simple that sometimes it throws people off.
Yeah. Well, I also had this juice with garlic in it. I'm probably all beefed up on garlic.
Oh, no.
So I know, right? So vampires, stay away. So we're going to discuss a couple different things today. We're going to talk about what the field really looks like today. And we're going to talk about leveling the playing field for your process and understanding the best way to do it. And then how to stand out as an employer of choice through your interview process. Sound like a plan?
Sounds amazing.
All right, awesome. So I find one of the challenges today is that we still have remnants of the old mentality of we select candidates, and the way in which this whole interviewing process has been going is really this. It hasn't changed much from 5 years ago, right? Where there was an ample supply of people, and people were just willing to take jobs at whatever people gave them. So I find that mindset is one of the main things that I'm seeing is kind of a big challenge. But what would you say would be kind of some of the challenges that you're seeing in the playing field today?
Yeah, well, talking from the employee's perspective, as you said, we have, I think, a luxury today that our parents and definitely our grandparents didn't have, which is choosing a place that we actually enjoy working for and with the people. And I think COVID was a particularly interesting pivoting point because, it felt like the end of the world for the beginning. I know we're like 2 years in now, so we've all kind of normalized it. But in the beginning of the pandemic, it really felt like, oh my gosh, like what is going to happen? Unemployment rate skyrocketed. People were left in their homes, and it started getting them thinking also about, am I dedicating my life hours to something that's meaningful? And that's where some of the tables I feel like shifted in terms of bringing the power to the employee and the Great Resignation, et cetera. Yeah. But from a company perspective, the Great Resignation also prompted things like they needed to differentiate themselves from other organizations, which I think is relevant pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. Well, we're not fully post, but
it'll never be over.
Yeah, that's
it'll just be another version of it for a while.
But differentiating the company, right? Ultimately recruiters need to increase the chance of them closing a candidate versus another company. They need to give the candidate a taste of their company's culture, hopefully to align expectations, keep the employee with the company for a longer amount of time, which is a topic that I'm very passionate about. And then the other challenge is that I think, is how do you do this all in a remote environment? I think there's an increase of job postings online. And the question is, how do we best optimize the salary that's going in on that job posting? And there's probably a large group of people that will be listening that are like, do we post? Do we not post the job salary on the job posting? And that's something else that I think companies are challenged with today.
Yeah, well, I think there's another thing that you can optimize for too, which is remote versus, not remote. I mean, there are a good majority of people that love to go to the office. I'm one of those people that I need to go away and get in my office, because if I don't get very much work done, because then I start making lunch and watching Dr. Phil, and next thing you know, I burn through 3 hours of my time. I don't really watch Dr. Phil, but you see what I mean? Like, and then there are those who, just are way more productive from home. And so it's kind of created a little bit of a divide too, as to, I think it's very helpful. The ones who are trying to stay working from home in an environment where they want people to come in, those values have shifted, right?
Absolutely.
So I think it's really key that, again, people, if you're in one of those situations, you just embrace it and go find somewhere else.
Yeah, there's some tough decisions that are going to have to be learned from both sides of the table, from the employees, from the companies. I read a cool stat, I don't remember from where, but I think 16% of companies are going to stay fully remote, and around 75% of them are going to be hybrid, leaving the rest for the fully in-person. I think this was in reference primarily to the tech industry, and I'm happy to go fish out the fact post podcast. But it really starts creating a discussion of what does hybrid look like, and all the new buckets that companies need to find themselves filling.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, then you brought up salary, right? Posting salary. I'm not a fan of it. I mean, I think a job description or a job advertisement, if you're putting it out there and you're posting, is a marketing document, right? So it should be focused in on the merits of getting the right people in the door. And to me, money should be a conversation that you have with each individual. You could put a range, but even that, some people are going to bow out or lean in because of it, right?
Totally.
You're going to get people that are going to apply because, oh, this job pays $200,000 a year, and I'm only making $100,000 a year now. So like, then they start thinking they're going to get something that they're not going to do. So it does have a negative side to it, where it could set expectations too high.
Totally. I mean, I think this is the unique part of the process where interests are totally not aligned between the two parties, right? Naturally, yeah. The candidate wants the highest amount that they can get, and the employer probably wants the lowest amount that they can get for that candidate. And I think candidates, there's a lot of talks about how salaries should be required and mandated to be put on job descriptions. And I even heard that it's becoming like more of a legal requirement by state. But I think that ultimately there's people don't realize how kind of complex it is often to operate a company in those early stages. And you might be optimizing for different things. So there's junior employees that you're like, okay, I'm willing to take a bet on you and potentially give you a lower range or under the range even, but I don't want to completely close myself out to the higher range and the most qualified candidate either. And sometimes, at least for us, we find ourselves hiring for multiple roles at once, and we don't know what fully the budget we can optimize for until we have some of those other roles lined up, right? So maybe I have a $300,000 budget, annual budget, making numbers up, allocate annually amongst 3 roles. And depending if one of them ends up being more expensive, I might have to balance the other 2 with other more junior roles. And I think people oversimplify this process and say, hey, you have a job posting up, like put a salary range. And then they realize, hey, we're still figuring things out on the back end, and we're seeing an array of people that are coming through our doors.
Well, they're forcing smaller companies to play by the rules of large companies. Large companies can budget it out and they can put a range. And I think it's fair for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But when you're a startup, like you just said, there's too many extenuating circumstances that can come into play here. You might find somebody who's stronger here, and then you need to supplement them somewhere else. And it doesn't make any sense. So that's why I'm not a fan of putting up compensation, because I want to make sure that I'm attracting talented people to my organization and then dealing with those details later, as opposed to letting talented people look at my job description and go, nah, they're not paying enough.
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, I think at the end of the day, one of the things that's so important about getting to a point where you are leveling the playing field is getting that candidate to go past that initial job description and actually apply. And you have to incorporate in your careers page, in your job description, other things that are going to excite them. And usually those things to us that we're seeing is cultural elements. Yep. Photos of the team, your values as a company, your, like, if there is a very clear, like, professional career path, maybe saying, hey, this is what the next 5 years of working at your company look like, getting them like a taste for being like, I want to have a conversation, and then leaving, as you said, the conversation about salary towards the end of the first call, in my opinion.
It's so very true. All right, you're listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. For our podcast listeners, we're going to take a quick educational moment from our sponsors. Hey, check out stridesearch.com. There you'll find a link to order your copy of Healing Career Wounds. Let it be your secret weapon to landing the strongest talent for your company. So we're talking to Lee Rubin, and we're discussing about leveling the playing field. You just alluded to something which I like to talk about a lot, but for those naysayers out there who say, focus on the culture and, all those other outside things that seem like really fluffy, they probably don't work, right? Why should I spend my time doing that? Why should I spend my time doing that?
Yeah. Well, I obviously have a very strong opinion that people and culture is the spinal cord of every organization. And I think that you look at pretty much every big movement that we care about, and let's just take professional sports. Like, this is something that I think people can, like, very clearly understand. Like, you can't often build a good professional sports team if there's a difficult dynamics between the players that are actually working there, players with their coaches. That just affects their overall morale. And I don't compare my team to a family, but I do compare my team to a professional sports team. And it's important that everyone does their job well, but it's also important that all of us learn how to communicate together, learn how to pass the ball to one another, learn how to say good job, and coach one another, lift each other up when we're down. And this is what makes great businesses.
That's a great analogy, because, everybody, like, even if you follow a sports team, there's a culture around that, right? Like, so people identify themselves as, like, a Raiders fan or a cheesehead or, whatever that is. And that's a culture. So, like, if you believe that it doesn't work, then you might want to examine really what it is you believe in, because it does. And, like, the results that you've been getting because of it, I mean, going from 0 to 60 people in 3 years is pretty outstanding. So obviously you're doing something right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a heck of a journey.
I know, right? I can commiserate with you. I'm 2 years behind you, but yeah, I'm in the same boat. All right. So let's talk about how we solve the problem. So let's help our guests kind of put a framework in place where they can level the playing field and come out looking like an employer of choice, where would they start?
Awesome. Well, I think there's a few things that I like to think about, and I like to reverse engineer how to get to my end result. So I think one big prediction that I have in the world of recruiting is that some of the conversation is going to change. And it's not just going to be about the initial recruiting process, but it's going to be about how long that employee stays over time. So I like to compare this if you're thinking about like customer acquisition, there's the CAC and then there's the LTV. And similarly, there's the employee cost of acquiring like an employee, the cost of acquiring an employee, and then the lifetime value that employee has over time. So within each role, you need to start thinking, okay, what is my end goal for this employee? Do I want them to grow into a more senior role? Do I want to hire a more senior person outside? Do I want to, turn people around and I just want them to stay for 6 to 12 months and then go out and do something else with their life. So start there, and that's going to help you start to craft what kind of people you're looking for. And ideally, part of the whole vision behind leveling the playing field is how do we make it where it's a win-win scenario for both you as an employer and the person that you're hiring. And I think a big part of that comes from like authenticity. So how do you understand what it is that you want and start pairing it with what it is that people are looking for and make it a genuinely authentic connection?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's really, really building upon your values as well, right? I mean, if you, I talk a little bit about sometimes that, if you're an organization of hunters that essentially, like, you guys are all about profits at all costs and watch your back and that sort of thing, you should own it and you should put it out there, because there are people that will resonate with that and do well in that environment. That's being your authentic self, like you're saying. And I think if you're, the way in which you run your organization, where it's like I'm really focused on culture and I want to make sure that people are taken care of, then that should be the messaging too. And those are all driven by your values.
Absolutely. Yeah. Values is a huge part.
Definitely. All right. So we're showing up authentic. Then what?
So just to make sure, the question that you've asked is, why is this important? Like, why should this be important to the company, and or why?
No. How do we lay out a framework for our listeners so they can actually kind of level the playing field and plug this into their business?
Got it. Okay. So how do we solve the problem? How do we actually make this happen?
Exactly.
So first step is really getting that person to feel comfortable with the speaker, the recruiter that is going to be connecting them with that business. And there's a few things that I like to do to get them comfortable. One of them is I literally like to say it. So I like to say phrases like, hey, I want this to be a comfortable, casual conversation. Ultimately, I want to see if there is a vibe fit. Because culture is very important to us and we need to be working together. We're going to need to like each other's company if we're going to be working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Those are a significant portion of our life goes to working with our colleagues. We have to get along. So that's what I'm looking for.
Sure.
Yeah.
So getting people comfortable. So you're kind of giving them an outline of what you're expecting or your expectations. And then how are you actually getting them comfortable in the interaction?
Yeah. So my body language is a big part. I'm speaking to them similarly to I'm speaking to you. I'm, not as formal and like, hi, welcome, thank you. I'm not doing all of that. I'm just like, hey, it's good to see you. Where are you in the world? Oh, I like your Zoom background. Like, kind of as you would be talking to almost a friend of sorts.
Sure.
Yeah. Casual talk.
So you're bringing your authentic self.
Being my authentic self.
There
and
you go.
I it's a matter of also like the power. Like I don't want it to seem like I'm the boss, I'm in charge. I show them that I'm excited to speak with them, and I talk about the vibe fit.
Yeah. One of the things that I found works really well if you want to get people at ease is get them talking about themselves first, because we all love to talk about ourselves, right? So if somebody's nervous, and I have a opening like conversation piece that I use all the time, which is, so what's happening with you that has you open to hearing about something potentially stronger? And I'm just trying to get them to open that door as to what might be their pay point or what might be something that would connect us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very similar, because once I get them to feel comfortable, I set an agenda for the call. And the first thing that I ask them to do is give me a 2-minute introduction of themselves.
Okay.
Something that can paint a story from their resume and show me a little bit more of their charisma and how do they bundle their life story in the course of 2 minutes to get them opened up and comfortable.
Okay, so this is interesting because, so first off, it seems to me like you're going to have people that are going to focus on either work or they're going to focus on like their personal life, right?
Yeah.
So, are you looking for a blend of two, or you?
It's interesting. I like to leave it open-ended, because you're going to learn something about how people are actually going to respond to that.
Mhm.
So like naturally we're in a professional interview, and you're going to get the people that say something like, so I was born in Georgia, I have a sister named Barbara, and my dog, 3 cats, whatever. And they're going to go on like this cute little personal life story. And those are people that are usually a bit more entry level. These are usually people that don't actually come from tech companies. This is kind of one of their first go arounds at like a real, I'm going to say real job, but actually I don't like that phrase. Like a tech job, I probably is the safest.
Professional job.
A professional job.
Yeah.
And then there's people that have a beautiful way of balancing and interweaving both a little bit of personal and professional. But the reality is, what you're looking to hear is someone that gets that this is an interview, talks about their professional experience, and maybe in the last 10 seconds, sprinkles a little bit of like, and I live in Miami and I have a dog named Eleanor.
Okay. Well, what about, they're like accountants and engineers and people who are like, typically the introverted types. Because I found that those tend to be a little bit more challenging from the perspective of like, people who aren't overly talkative or share a lot, don't tend to really get into the details of it or tell a good story, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, well, I prioritize storytelling or good storyteller with a position that requires it. So I'm like, okay, don't need you to be a good storyteller for an accountant. So if you're just like rah, 1, 2, 3 in your 2-minute intro for an accountant, I might actually be like, oh, wow, this person was very concise. They stuck to the 2 minutes. They went through it and gave me like a chronological, organized order of like their life. And that might actually paint a picture for me for an accountant that I feel like would symbolize what a good accountant might actually be like. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I don't need my accountant to be a good salesperson.
That's very true. That's very true.
I might actually not want them to be a good salesperson, because then I would be afraid, what's going on with these books? They'll be like, yeah, I totally did the books last week. No.
I would agree with you 100%. I probably don't want my engineers being good storytellers either, because, again, they're going to be spending too much time talking story than getting work done.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Right.
Their hours are expensive. So you want them focused on coding.
Exactly. Well, how much is that 2-minute window? How important is that?
For me, and when you're saying how important is it that they stick to the 2 minutes?
Yeah, because some people, when you get into the story, that can evolve into a half-hour story about their cousin Mike, who, went to Miami, Florida, and wrestled a crocodile. Like, all kinds of things can happen there.
That's all important, like context, right? Because if
Sure.
you know that, for example, with salespeople, an important quality of them is asking questions and getting the other person comfortable. So if you have a salesperson that's just giving a 30-minute pitch about themselves when you ask them specifically to keep it to 1 to 2 minutes, then you've got a rambler, and a rambler probably won't make a good salesperson. So
Very true.
all of these are good context. I also purposely like to explicitly say, like, please keep your intro to 1 to 2 minutes, because a lot of people aren't going to keep that 1 to 2 minutes, and you're going to figure out who follows the prompt and who doesn't. It doesn't necessarily mean that the people that go above those 2 minutes are disqualified. But you do want someone who's also aware of the time. So like a lot of times you'll see people say, like, I think I just went over the 2-minute mark. I'm sorry, I just got, swept up in my story. And that to me has also an effect in a good way, because they're at least aware.
Perfect. All right. So they've given their 2-minute intro. Now what? What's the next step?
So they give their 2-minute intro. I usually lead with questions after the 2-minute intro. I want to continue to ask them things and about their resume. And the questions do vary. I'll give you like some examples. One of them that I love asking no matter what is, why are you looking to currently to leave your current job? So that's one that I stick to. And if they're currently employed. And then another one is, if they are currently employed, I like to ask them if their team/company knows if they are leaving, which I think is a unique question to ask that I don't know if other companies ask.
Why would that be important?
Why is that important? So there's different things that you'll extract from asking that question. One of them is the person that replies back saying, yes, absolutely, my manager knows, my company knows. And to me, this shows a level of maturity. This shows someone that has good communications. This shows someone who has loyalty, that's not going to leave their company hanging. And this is something that I prioritize very highly. Then there's a person that says, no, absolutely not. That would be ridiculous for me to talk to them. And that to me is like, red flag. Because I'm like, oh no, this person is going to leave their company hanging, is going to leave their team hanging. Yeah. I'm sure that you've dealt with this. I'm sure that all of the listeners have dealt with this. You're going to also find this category of people in that no section that will go back to their employer once you give them an offer, say, hey, I'm going to leave. And then that employer says, wait, no, I'm going to give you a raise. I'm going to change your title. Let's talk about this. Let's try to make it work. And then they come back to you and say, hey, Rick, I finally spoke to my boss and we had a really great conversation and I'm going to stay. And I'm not going to move forward with your position.
And what's interesting is a lot of people fear that, but I think that saves you so much time, because you didn't go forth with an offer and invest all this extra time in trying to close somebody and then have them turn it down at the end. Totally. There's no reason why you should ever lose anybody to a counter offer, because that's a great point. All right,
the company that they're already working with. That's the thing. It's not even like to a different company that you're up against. It's to the company that they're currently employed with. Exactly.
All right, shoot, we're getting pretty close on time, Lee. What would be 2 or 3 key takeaways you can give the audience we can plug into their business today?
Okay, a few key elements. One of them is to optimize for the people you want to go through the shit with. So that's to me my number one. Optimize for employees that share your same values. That's kind of similar to that first point. For me, academia is overrated, so I don't really hold super tightly to.
Amen, sister.
The Harvards and the Google alumni of the world. It's a lot of frosting. And I look at loyalty as the number one currency for what I'm looking for. I want to see a resume that has 3-5 years of experience plus, and I know that person's going to see multiple evolutions of that business and go through the hard times.
That is so very true. Well, Lee, thanks so much for your time and investment today. And I want to welcome you to the Higher Power Radio community. Now, what would be the best way in which members of our audience could find you, find Confetti? Anything that you want to like to plug? Here's your moment.
Absolutely. Well, you can follow me on LinkedIn, which Rick, will you have like a link?
Yeah, we'll have everything linked.
Awesome. You can also shoot me over an email. I'm happy to answer any questions. Lee@withconfetti.com. And happy to extend a confetti credits or a little coupon to anyone that comes from the Higher Power Radio to give our platform a shot, but hopefully show your team a good time if any of you are struggling with that retention piece or that culture piece.
Perfect. And we'll have a link that we can send over. Awesome. All right. Well, I want to thank our listening audience for tuning in to this week's episode of Higher Power. Quick thanks to our team, Brian Colburn, Andrea Ballin, and Ayla Gerard. If you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share. After all, we want to continue to grow the show for you and provide valuable content week after week. You can join the Higher Power Radio community at Higher, H-I-R-E, Power, P-O-W-E-R, radio, R-A-D-I-O.com, or you can drop me an email at rick@stridesearch.com. Tune in next Tuesday. Our guest is going to be Rafael Danilo. He is the founder and CEO of Yobs. I'm your host, Rick Gerard, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power Radio. Catch our LinkedIn Live show every Tuesday at noon or download the podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate you joining us on Higher Power Radio with your guide to recruitment success, Rick Gerard.